Welcome, everyone. We are getting into the next game, but I do believe we have a momentary pause so we get some things sorted out. But I am ZombieGrub, now here casting with Poke Bunny, who already made it out of his group's guest caster. He's Taryn. How are you doing?
Great. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. As I said, you made it out of your group, and coincidentally, we are casting the remaining of your group.
Yep.
I don't know if that was Joe's plan all along or just coincidence, but pretty cool. So what do you think about the upcoming match?
Well, it'll definitely be a good one. As you mentioned, I made it out of this group in first, so I actually played both of these players already, and I'm definitely very familiar with both of them. Raze has been a mainstay at all the East Coast LAN events for quite a while now, and even has made it into a couple, WCS challengers in round of 32 at DreamHack Austin, I believe, this year or last year. So he's definitely been around. EndOfLine. Probably been around a little less, but he certainly gave me a hell of a time. So I'm looking to see how he does against Raze.
I've actually known EndOfLine for quite some time. He goes to DC lands whenever he's not attending weddings or something like that. Very passionate guy about StarCraft. Yeah. So I must have met him 5 years ago at this point or something along those lines. So he's been around for quite some time, but it's a very I guess he's a little bit older, so maybe he contributes a little bit, but he has a very, calm way of approaching the game.
Yeah.
He doesn't mind when he loses. He's like, oh, I just learned something.
Right.
And you're just like, you have to be, a little agitated a little bit. He just, complain a little bit, and he refuses to do it. So he's a really awesome person to get to know and a really awesome person to play against. Years ago, I took a game off him. I thought it was, a great thing because he was GM and I wasn't, so. Yeah. Which he still is. He's been very consistent.
Yeah, as you mentioned, definitely one of those players with kind of his own approach to the game. So as, in terms of the mental state, and also in terms of the strategy, he's not doing completely off-the-wall stuff, but he definitely has his own distinct style, and you won't necessarily see him copying, the top Korean build orders every day. He kind of finds his own way to play the game, and then he kind of hones it and capitalizes on what he thinks are his strengths.
Yeah, exactly. And you can hear him talk about it too, which is why I think that's a really apt description, where he'll talk about very specific timings, and he'll have these own ideas of how to deal with them. And while they're a little bit wonky, they do sometimes end up working quite well. But we are into the game. We are going to be spawning on Abyssal Reef, which actually I'm kind of cast too much of, which is really weird. But it is a TVZ, as said in the top left, as the red Zerg for Storm Gaming. He is EndOfLine.
And over here in the bottom right-hand corner, playing for Sloth Esports Club, we have the Terran player Raze.
Awesome. Sloth versus Storm. As I was mentioning in the last cast that I did, there's just a ton of really awesome teams that came out to just everyone participated from the team that came to support everyone else who actually got through. So I guess maybe Storm guys are in the crowd along with the Sloth guys, and they're fisticuffing right now or something like that. I'm sure that's how that goes down.
Yeah, we've definitely got a lot of representation from both of these teams here. So I think they'll both have a lot of support.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have the TVZ, we have two different teams. We even have a little bit of the older guy versus the younger guy. Raze being very young, and Divine being definitely older in terms of I guess gamers who spend a lot of time playing StarCraft. But what else can be said about their styles? When I see Raze, I do see, I think, less of that I don't want to say less of creativity, it makes it sound bad, but where EndOfLine is thinking constantly of new ways and different ways to take on challenges rather than just saying, well, the Koreans did it this way. Raze does seem like one of those guys who's becoming the NA talent because he is just focusing on the mechanics and focusing on the solid strategies to execute better.
Right, yeah. Raze definitely does not do nearly as much off-the-wall stuff, but what I will say about Raze is he definitely is a diverse player. He's willing to play bio and mech. He's willing to play aggressive openers. He's willing to play macro, long macro games. He really plays a variety of styles, even if, it does tend towards that sort of, time-honored approach where he's usually using more conventional styles. It's still kind of, he's able to play a lot of them.
Yeah. I think the last time that I saw him was actually for the TESPA tournaments that happened, a month ago at this point. Unfortunately, I don't believe he made it to the round of 8s, and I do believe I'm really calling this correctly. But I have heard nothing but good things about him and the up-and-comers, especially when you hear about Terran. Usually I remember it just because when it comes to 400 Terrans, sometimes they can really feel like a dying breed.
Absolutely. Raze has kind of slowly been steadily working his way up. He hasn't had a huge breakout performance, but has slowly been getting better and better results in WCS and these smaller lands.
Yeah. So, I mean, very normal stuff happening so far. The Reaper opener, he didn't follow up with a Marine, but he's following up with Marines. The Reactor came down, but did not swap over onto that factory. And I talked about this in a TVZ a while ago, but just that there are some Terrans who don't just go into Hellions, even though they are going for 1-1-1. What do you think about these builds?
I think it's all sort of centered around the idea that I think Terrans in this matchup generally feel like they want to catch the Zerg off guard as much as possible. So being able to play a wide variety of build orders early on definitely gives you an edge because you have a greater chance to catch the Zerg off guard. You know, if you're not opening Hellions every game, maybe the games that you do open Hellions, you're able to sneak a couple by into the natural and get a few early drone kills. So if you have, you know, a diverse set of build orders, you're more likely to do damage early on with whatever it is you choose. And I think this is one example of that where, you know, if Raze did this build that looks like a Widowmine drop every game, it probably wouldn't be super effective. But, you know, considering he plays a lot of Hellion openings, might even throw the occasional 2-on-1 in there, you know, you might see it be more effective.
Now, I was going to say it's been a while since EndOfLine scouted, but that's incorrect. He has not scouted at all, ever. So Overlords are really out of place. I wonder what his preference is for not just having one on the left, one on the right. He will see the medevac, and that does seem a bit lucky. There's also just that timing where, like, okay, Hellions haven't showed themselves, so what is it?
Right.
I think the worst case scenario was that it was a 2-1-1 he wasn't prepared for, but just a Widowmine drop that doesn't get very much here. Instant pull from him. No drone to tag at the third base is actually perfectly fine.
Yeah, we're already seeing a little bit of a unique approach from EndOfLine. He's got the Roach Warren along with the double Evolution Chamber. The double Evolution Chamber, you know, we will see fairly often, but, you know, going straight into that ranged attack, perhaps not so much. Usually we see the Ling Bane opening generally into Hydra, occasionally Muta, but EndOfLine does really love his Roaches with those fast upgrades, going up for that lair now as well so he can get the Roach speed and the 2-2. So it seems like it'll be a pretty heavy Roach-centric mid-game from EndOfLine.
So the follow-up of this Widowmine drop is going to be a tank drop / push, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But this was being done in the beginning of Legacy of the Void to some good effect, and on Abyss of Reef. This map's been in the map pool forever. But usually I would say it's not up against this third base in particular.
Yeah.
And then additionally, it has just fallen out. So that means Zergs are going to get better and better at being able to hold it. Is this actually going to be doing the damage it's looking for, especially when there's already creep spread over here?
Well, I will say the fact that he's going up against Roaches with this sort of not late layer, but Roach speed isn't going to be a factor here. Definitely gives it a good opportunity to be effective, and it's already gone ahead and taken out that third base very quickly, which is a huge bonus for Raze, as his own third base is over halfway complete behind this.
Yeah, that seemed like a real freebie. I mean, I don't think EndOfLine should have done anything about it. He didn't have enough units, but really, I'm continuing to look at this, and the lack of scouting from EndOfLine, he could have potentially seen those two medevacs that he had an Overlord in the usual place that it is, which is a little bit of what we're seeing right now on top of the podium. But he really doesn't have a lot of vision of the map, of the base, of the strategy, if it's bio, if it's mech, because it is mech, despite seeing so many Marines. Right,
yeah, definitely a little bit of a surprise, I think. You know, he saw, I think that was something like 12, 14 Marines in that initial attack, the initial mine drop plus the two medevacs with the tanks. So he's seen quite a number of Marines. So, you know, if I were a Zerg player, I would probably be leaning towards bio, even though we obviously haven't seen anything that would confirm it, like stim pack or bio upgrades. It does seem like there have been a good amount of Marines, but we have double armory with that 1-1 mech going behind this.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is what EndOfLine is doing is kind of okay against both bio and mech.
Right.
Roach Hydra. And to be honest, even Ling Bane, Ling Hydra can be good against both for a time. So there's not really anything to fault him for this, but losing that third base for free, being cut to like staying on 50 drones for this long while he waits for this hatchery to now be up and running, certainly he shouldn't have as much of a powerful mid-game as you would expect, as Raze is the one now building up here.
Yeah, I mean, I will say one thing about EndOfLine is that he is more willing than a lot of Zerg players to play with a late third base. Now, obviously, this wasn't intended this game, as he did build it relatively early, but it got taken out. But I was listening to talk to Zerg Girl earlier about her match against Raze, because she was the fourth player in this group. And, you know, he was recommending her to take, like, a later third to deal with Raze's frequent, like, Hellbat pushes or other aggression. And I found that interesting because that's not an approach that most Zergs would take. Most Zergs would still try to get away with the early third, and they would just find, you know, perhaps other ways to prepare for Hellbats other than just delaying our third.
Absolutely. And, you know, whether or not he's absolutely correct is actually not so important in my opinion. I mean, unless you are literally in GSL and perfecting your builds, I think that if it does mean you save money or that you are able to not take damage, then perhaps it is the better way to play.
Right.
And we do, like, to mention here, the third base was the only thing that was killed. And that's a pretty big deal, but it was only the hatchery, not drones, not roaches in an attempt to defend it.
Right.
No queens died as well, so it was something he definitely was willing to give up here. Now getting to better drone count, but he's been at 50, whereas Raze has been beyond 50 for some time and should be able to get a fourth base, what's looking to be no problem here.
Yeah, I mean, especially as a mech Terran, I think you're generally playing from sort of down in bases, down in workers type of situation, and this is definitely the opposite, where we've got a mech Terran who's very comfortably ahead in economy. He will be a bit behind in the upgrades, but, you know, the upgrades are not quite as much of an issue for the mech player as they are for, you know, for example, Marines versus Roaches really struggle when they're down on upgrades, but, you know, tanks, the upgrades are nice, but they're going to chew apart some Roaches either way.
This looks really silly, double medevac drop when you're going mech, but he has them, so why not use them? Now, end of line, I would feel a lot better about his position, regardless of the drones, if he had a Hive and Vipers, because then I think, you know, with the upgrades and then a max out, maybe he can't re-max out, but if the push is good enough, then maybe it doesn't matter. Well, without Vipers, I don't think that could ever be true. Even with Tunneling Claws, which he's not getting, he's just getting Burrow, I don't think it'd be that effective. So I'm really trying to get worried for end of line's late game here, because his mid game hasn't really been that impressive. I mean, there's nothing been really happening. He's trying to do something now, but there's so many tanks already to spread out. What is really going to be the result of this?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like he really wants to make something happening with his 2-2 upgrades that are done now. And here come all the Roaches. The right flank is taken out quickly, though, before the left flank can even fully engage. And so he is forced to back off almost immediately. Yeah,
but only now he's on an Infestation Pit. And unfortunately, I believe that if that was the thing that told him, like, oh, shoot, I need Vipers, then he's just simply too late to them.
Right.
The game might go on. You know, Raze might not want to push until he's really securely on 2-2 with 200. And that's going to give end of line time to get to those Vipers. But again, going back to the economy now, where this push didn't work, he's not on good tech, and there's not a lot of remaxes he can do. I'm glad to see that he's double expanding now, but it is still only on 57 drones.
Right, yeah, I mean, Raze is, as you mentioned, getting very close to that max out with 2-2, at which point I've got to imagine he's going to start trying to make a move on the map, and we do see him move out from his fourth base now, going to probably start trying to clear up some creep and find a good location to engage. And I mean, end of line's got some Roaches here, but Raze not even having to siege up as the Roach army is split up a bit here.
Yeah. I would be surprised if Raze started scanning kind of wildly. Of course, take out creep, but also, like, where are your Vipers? Like, how can you possibly only be on a Roach army? But that is the truth. It's really just a Roach army.
End of line setting up a big flank from two sides here, and Roaches do come in on these tanks. It does seem like they're going to take out a few tanks on the left, but it does seem like the Roaches, Hydras, and Ravagers will eventually fall. And really, the supply tells a story as Raze just got by far the better end of that engage.
Yeah, not really a contest there. GG. End of line, not getting the best start to the game with losing that hatchery, but beyond that, I'm not sure that there is enough of the, how to say, like the Zerg. You know, you drone, you drone, then you do the push. He didn't really drone.
Right.
He kind of made the push, and then it was too weak to go up against a turret, like a mech on 3 bases, and then he made another push, and that was too weak to go into a late game mech, and it just, you know, he fell behind in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of me thinks maybe he was caught a little off guard by the mech. I'm not sure what moment he actually realized that Raze was, you know, going mech full on, because as we mentioned early in the game, you know, the fact that there were so many Marines part of the initial harass made it feel like maybe it could be bio. But, you know, obviously we never saw Stim, and even though he had those 2 medevacs of Marines active quite late into the game on the map, you know, he was always building towards that mech composition. And I wonder what point end of line, you know, maybe he just his brain was turned off a little bit and he didn't quite realize until far too late, and that was the delay in his Vipers. Or maybe he thought he really could do more damage with that 2/2 attack.
Yeah. I mean, we'd have to ask him, of course, but I think you might be right about that bio, because Roaches and Ravagers and Infestors, because he did get an Infestation, but he just didn't ever have a chance to go to Hive, can buy a lot of time against a bio pusher. But when the mech player is maxed out with 200-200, they could just steamroll an army like what EndOfLine had. As long as they scan no Vipers, they're not too afraid.
Right, yeah. I mean, going into the second game, it does seem like Raze definitely looks a little sharper right now. But, I'd really like to see if EndOfLine's going to bring out something different. He did play this sort of fast upgrade Roach style a lot against me. So I didn't necessarily see a different tactic. He did do some sort of little weird pool first stuff in one of the games. So maybe we'll see some different type of aggression. But I'm hoping to see something new to try to throw him off this game.
You said that you had some difficulty against him, even though he did similar things. What was difficult for your games?
Well, yeah. So the game, I went 2-1 against him, so I did lose a game. The game that I lost, I was behind from the early game. I did a proxy 2 Rex Marine that was scouted and did very little damage. So I was pretty significantly behind in economy in the game that I ultimately lost. But I mean, in game 3, it was a pretty closely contested game, and it was just because you really have to respect Roach upgrades. I was playing Bio, so it was a little bit different. And I don't think I quite respected the upgrade disadvantage that I had in that game. And so I took a couple engages that were not necessarily well chosen, because you sort of have an instinct of how strong units are, and when the upgrades are unusual, like better or worse than they generally are, that throws off your instinct a bit, and I didn't quite recognize that as much as I could have.
Well, maybe it will be changed if it was playing Bile, but we're on Catalyst for the second game. In the bottom right, as the red Zerg, he is EndOfLine, going for the double extractor trick. All right.
Yeah, interesting. I think he did that last game as well, now that I think about it. I remember seeing his supply at 16 out of 14. And taking up residence in the top left-hand corner, we have the blue Terran player for Sloth Esports Club. It is Raze.
Now, I kind of tapered off and said, but it's Catalyst. Well, it doesn't really matter what the map is. I think that all maps at this point in time have the possibility of mech and bio. Perhaps a stylistic preference. You don't want to play big maps with bio getting surrounded, but you don't mind if mech's surrounded or something like that. But now most games can be played either or. In Catalyst, while it's a shorter distance and much more plain, typical map, there's very obvious pathways on it. And bio sounds, fairly good. You can do that rally push to the third base or fourth base. Mech also hits just that much faster. Not that time was ever, I think, against Raze. It was definitely a switch in the game last game. But imagine if, that was Catalyst. This push hits 10 seconds sooner, and it's just obliteration, and Len gets no chance to set up a surround or a flank, and just his roaches get obliterated. So it is up to Raze, basically, what he wants to do. But playing mech and getting such a clean win, I wouldn't be shocked if he did it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that is true about Catalyst is that it really has a lot of kind of winding paths, a lot of counterattack options, a lot of flank options. We did see EndOfLine trying to set up maneuvers like that on Abyssal Reef that, perhaps didn't go so well, mostly because of the army size rather than the maneuver. But this is definitely a map that favors those kind of sort of run around, look for a flank or look for a counter or try to catch your opponent off guard. This is definitely a map where those kind of things are possible, also due to the smaller distance, as you did mention.
Yeah, and the base layout was really for Abyssal Reef. When you get past that third, the fourth and a fifth are a given, basically. It gives you a triangle pattern kind of no matter what you do, unless, EndOfLines, I guess, wasn't, but that didn't work out well for him. Whereas Catalyst, you don't really get that same thing. You take the third base, and that's a little tough, and then the fourth base comes down, and there's a whole left side of the map for Raze that he just won't have many eyes on. But EndOfLine, unless he's going to play a different style that does have maybe tunneling claws shenanigans, or maybe it's more Ling-based, we aren't going to see too much abuse for that. He was looking for the direct engagements, but by the time he realized what he was going up against, it was too late. That was the problem.
Yeah, we do have Raze going for the Hellions this time around. Also, pretty standard build with the 1-1-1, just going for the Hellions rather than a Mind Drop this time. EndOfLine hasn't yet made a move to take his third. He actually did let a Spine finish in his natural mineral line, and I don't think... The Reaper was in the main, so I don't think that was even used to save a drone. I think that was just a spine that was intended from the start. And he actually, the reason I think that's especially the case is he built a spine in one of his games against me that seemingly had no purpose to me. I guess it just seems like something that he likes to do, is build an early spine crawler. And he is going for that Roach Warren once again before even starting the third base. And in fact, no third base on the horizon. And did he skip link speed as well? I don't recall seeing that. Yeah. So yeah, definitely a unique opener. Looks like it's once again going to be those Roaches, probably with somewhat early upgrades since he's banking up quite a bit of gas. And 4 Hellions do come into the natural, even with the spine in position before he can finish any sort of wall. They're going to get a couple drone kills, looking for more. 3 down so far, but it looks like EndOfLine is going to be able to clean these up at the cost of 4 drones, which for 4 Hellions, you know, the Hellions are obviously worth more, but drones, especially for a 2-base Zerg, are really valuable at this stage in the game, so it's not too bad for Raze.
That's what I was going to say. It's the circumstance at which he lost 4 Hellions to 4 drones. I mean, if this is 15 minutes, then I don't even think it's worth mentioning, really. But at this point, the 4 Hellions are probably worth cutting the drone supply down even more. The 2-base Zerg, it's like very safe where it's supposed to be. The Hellions were not supposed to be able to get through. But there's no Spore Crawler. The lair isn't as fast as the Banshee is here. So the Banshee will be able to tag a few.
Yeah, the Banshee coming in with Cloak, and there looks like it will be completely uncontested for at least a few seconds here. 3 drones have gone down so far, along with the 4 from earlier, so EndOfLine definitely taking some significant economy damage, as his lair is still only halfway done.
Yeah, and the right side is completely undefended. The lair is still not done, so no access to an Overseer. The Spore Crawler has to reburrow, which luckily does a little bit faster than a Spine Crawler, I suppose, but now the left side is weak, and this is just not going well as he left the drones there a little while longer. 13 drones, plus the Banshee lives, plus a third base is going to be even more difficult to take now with both Banshees and Hellions controlling the map.
Yeah, and Raze even throwing down his 3rd command center on location, something we really don't see often against Zerg due to the presence of speedlings in the vast majority of games. But, you know, with that link speed not on the table, this is definitely a move that is pretty safe. And I actually, you know, that's one of those kinds of things that a lesser Terran might not recognize and might not be able to take advantage of, is realizing that, you know, because that link speed is not available to the Zerg, that taking a third base on the location with Banshees may be completely safe. So, you know, those are the kind of things that, you know, may not stand out to the average spectator, but those can really make a difference in a game that perhaps maybe is a bit closer, as it looks like Raze has taken a pretty dominating lead with EndOfLine going down to 38 workers on 2 bases.
Even to give a hypothetical here, you know, obviously EndOfLine taking a lot of damage from the Banshees, and that's just, it's actually inexcusable at this point. Like, he might just lose the game because of this. Let's just say that he didn't. Even then, being on 2 bases, playing this style, Raze is, you know, he's becoming the next tier of Terran that he would be able to take advantages where some other players would really just try and butt their head against a defensive Zerg. No, he didn't so much butt his head as just kind of test and poke and prod, and then he said, okay, I know what's going on, and adapt to the situation very well. He's going to be able to defend his third base, too, because there's just nothing they can do. The Banshees lives. As long as they see the Roaches on the way, which they absolutely did, this isn't going to do anything. It's a bit of an awkward waste of units.
Right, and I mean, EndOfLine's unit count also is pretty much nothing because he's had to rebuild these drones over and over. He's sitting on 67 supply against the 105 of Raze. And I mean, he's got these nice Roach upgrades on the way with the speed, but he might even just roll over to this measly Hellion tank push with just a couple tanks and Banshees.
Yeah, one tank, actually. Oh, there's a second
There's
one.
another one.
Okay. Yeah, this looks like it is going to be a death push. And for this, I don't blame EndOfLine nearly as much. I mean, what are the chances a mech player especially going to push any time before 150? But this was just an open opportunity. He saw that there was nothing to be done about it. And he even takes kind of the smart path, I suppose. I think he could have continued pushing, but he just plays pretty smart and safe and pulls back from that.
Right, yeah, I mean, as we've been talking about, he's definitely in a position where he doesn't need to do more economic damage to be significantly ahead in economy. So he, you know, playing mech here, I think, you know, this isn't always true, but I think generally the mistake that mech players might make is to attack too early rather than too late. In my experience, that's my difficulty with mech, is I want to attack too much. So it's definitely a you know, smart move to back off. He's actually canceled the third base again with the Banshees, just poking around with these 2 Cloak Banshees still. And, you know, EndOfLine, I mean, he doesn't really have a win condition here. These Banshees are moving once again into the natural. He's building some Hydralisks. Maybe he wants to go for a push, but he's down so far in both economy and army that I can't imagine any sort of aggressive maneuver having any success. That's quite an army there.
Yeah, and Raze is just so confident he doesn't even bother, like, you know, safely sieging them up to protect the third and the natural and break down the rocks. Like, he knows how good he is in this game, how much control he has. So just letting them be on siege and rallying forward. Is taking a 4th base on location in the forward position. That's maybe even bolder than the 3rd base. And this is just a game where maybe, again, if EndOfLine had access to Vipers, he'd have a shot. But even then, with the 30 army supply difference going in favor of Raze, he wouldn't have the DPS to take advantage of the Blinding Clouds.
What is that upgrade on the factory tech class?
Smart Servos.
Ah, the transform upgrade. Yeah, I've never made that one. I'm a bio player, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost curious. Actually, I'd like to see what the kill counts on the Banshees are, because I feel like those are pretty much the MVPs of this game at this point. You know, both Banshees, one with 25 kills and the other with 15, and I think nearly all of those are drones. So I think that pretty much tells the story here. 2 Banshees getting nearly 40 drone kills. As the tanks and Hellbats move up, I think this is just going to be about it. You know, EndOfLine holding it back at this ramp a little bit, but these are just all going to go into the meat grinder, and that will be it.
Well played. Raze will take the 2-0 to get out of the group. Unfortunately, EndOfLine